She never thought her biggest fear would be the sound of her own heartbeat. Charlotte Montgomery pressed her palm against her chest, feeling the rapid flutter beneath her ribs as she sat in the cramped break room of TechFlow Solutions. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her meal prep containers. Sunday's ritual of stretching every dollar into a week's worth of nutrition. Quinoa salad, again. Hard-boiled eggs, again. The same routine that kept her grounded when everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. At 7 months pregnant, Charlie had mastered the art of making herself invisible. Oversized sweaters hid her growing belly, and she'd perfected the timing of bathroom breaks to avoid awkward conversations about baby showers and nursery themes. Her colleagues knew she was expecting, but they didn't know about the empty apartment in Queens where she talked to her unborn child in whispers, promising everything would be okay even when she wasn't sure herself. The anxiety had started small, a flutter in her chest during morning meetings, a tightness in her throat when bills arrived. But today, it felt different, heavier, like a storm gathering strength before breaking. "You good, Charlie?" Her desk neighbor, Marcus, poked his head into the break room. "You look a little pale." She forced a smile, the same one she'd been practicing for 6 months. "Just tired, you know how it is." But Marcus was already moving on, checking his phone, lost in his own world. Everyone was. That's what Charlie had learned about being alone. People asked if you were okay, but they rarely waited for an honest answer. Her phone buzzed against the table. A text from Oakley. "Coffee after work. I have news and you look like you need chocolate." Charlie smiled for real this time. Oakley had a gift for reading her moods through text messages and Instagram stories. It was both comforting and terrifying to be known so completely by someone. She typed back, "Sounds perfect, but decaf for me, obviously. Obviously. See you at 6. Wear something cute. We're celebrating." Celebrating what? Charlie wondered. But Oakley was notorious for her dramatic announcements. Last month it was a new sponsorship deal with a supplement company. The month before, she'd gotten verified on Instagram. For Oakley, life was a series of victories worth sharing with the world. Charlie envied that optimism sometimes. These days, her own victories felt smaller, more private. Getting through a day without crying, paying rent on time, feeling the baby kick and knowing, for just a moment, that she was creating something beautiful despite everything. The afternoon dragged by in a blur of spreadsheets and client emails. Charlie had become an expert at looking busy while her mind wandered to bigger questions. Would she be a good mother? Could she afford the crib she'd bookmarked online? Was it normal to feel this alone while carrying a whole other person inside her? By 5:30, she was gathering her things when her phone rang. Unknown number with a 212 area code. Charlie Montgomery speaking. "Ms. Montgomery, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from New York Presbyterian. I'm calling about your recent lab results." The world tilted. Charlie gripped the edge of her desk, suddenly aware of every eye in the office. "Is everything okay? I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Would you be able to come in this evening? We have some concerns about your blood pressure readings, Mida, and given your history of anxiety." The words blurred together. Concerns, blood pressure, history of anxiety. Charlie's hand instinctively moved to her belly, where the baby had been unusually quiet all day. "I'll be there," she whispered. She hung up and stared at her reflection in her phone's black screen, green eyes wide with worry, dark hair escaping from its careful bun. She looked like her mother, the same determined jaw, the same stubborn streak that had gotten her through college on scholarships and willpower. The subway ride to Manhattan felt endless. Charlie counted stops, counted breaths, counted the reasons everything would be fine. The baby was healthy at the last checkup. Her blood pressure had been elevated, but not dangerously so. This was probably just routine monitoring. But as the train pulled into her station, Charlie couldn't shake the feeling that nothing about her life had been routine for a long time. New York Presbyterian loomed ahead, its windows glowing golden in the early evening light. Somewhere inside those walls, answers waited. Charlie touched the small silver clover hanging from her neck, her grandmother's for luck, and walked through the sliding doors. She had no idea that in 20 minutes, she would come face to face with the man who had walked out of her life 6 months ago, the man who had suggested she take care of the situation before disappearing to California like their relationship had been nothing more than a problem to be solved, the man who was now her only hope of getting through the night. The last person Charlie expected to see in the emergency room was herself in a hospital gown. Deep breaths, "Ms. Montgomery, the nurse said, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around Charlie's arm for the third time in 20 minutes. Try to relax. Relax. Charlie almost laughed. She was sitting on a paper-covered bed in the maternity wing at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, wearing a hospital gown that felt like tissue paper, while strangers monitored every heartbeat of the baby she'd been protecting alone for 7 months. Relaxation seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford. The machine beeped steadily. Too fast. Too urgent. Charlie bit her lower lip, leaving that familiar little mark that would fade in seconds. Her mind raced through worst-case scenarios while she tried to remember the breathing exercises from the pregnancy app on her cracked iPhone. "Your friend is here," the nurse announced, pulling back the curtain. Oakley burst in like a small tornado of blonde hair and barely contained panic. Still wearing her lime green workout leggings and oversized hoodie, her blue eyes immediately scanned Charlie from head to toe, cataloging every detail with the precision of someone who cared too much to miss anything. "What happened?" "Your text just said hospital, and I swear I broke 3 traffic laws getting here." Oakley dropped into the chair beside the bed, instantly reaching for Charlie's hand. "Talk to me. Blood pressure spike. They're monitoring the baby." Charlie's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Dr. Chen said it could be nothing, but with my anxiety history..." "Okay." Breathable moment. Oakley squeezed her hand. "Remember when you thought you were dying during finals week junior year and it turned out to be a panic attack from too much caffeine? You're stronger than you think, Charlie girl." Charlie managed a weak smile. Oakley had nicknamed her Charlie Girl during their first week of college, when Charlie had been too nervous to eat in the dining hall alone. 7 years later, it still made her feel less alone in the world. "I keep thinking, what if something's wrong? What if I did something wrong? I've been so careful with everything I eat, every vitamin, every..." "Stop." Oakley's voice was firm but gentle. "You've been perfect. Annoyingly perfect, actually. You make those meal prep containers look like art projects." The curtain rustled, and a doctor stepped in. Tall, professional, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Ms. Montgomery, I'm Dr. Patricia Reyes. I'll be overseeing your care tonight." Charlie nodded, grateful for the warm authority in the doctor's voice. "Is everything okay with the baby?" "Baby's heartbeat is strong and steady. Your blood pressure is elevated, but not at dangerous levels yet. However, given that you're at 31 weeks, we want to be cautious." Dr. Reyes glanced at her chart. "Have you been under any additional stress lately?" Charlie's laugh came out hollow. Where should she start? The father who disappeared, the bills piling up on her kitchen counter, the fact that she'd been Googling how to install a car seat at 2 a.m. because she had no idea what she was doing. "Work has been demanding," she said instead. It was easier than explaining that her entire life felt like walking on a tightrope without a net. "I see you don't have an emergency contact listed besides." Dr. Reyes paused. "Oakley Sullivan." "That's me." Oakley raised her hand with a small wave. "Official best friend and emergency contact. Also certified baby whisperer, according to my Instagram bio." Dr. Reyes smiled. "Good to have support. Now, we're going to keep you for observation tonight, just to be safe. If your blood pressure stabilizes and baby continues looking good, you can go home tomorrow." Overnight, Charlie's stomach dropped. She'd never spent a night in a hospital, and the thought of sleeping in this sterile room while machines monitored her baby made her chest tight again. "I'll stay," Oakley said immediately, reading her panic. "They have those awful chairs that fold out into beds, right? I've got nowhere else to be." "Oak, you don't have to." "Try and stop me." Oakley was already pulling out her phone. "I'm texting my supervisor." Perks of being the favorite on the night shift. Coverage is never a problem. As Dr. Reyes left to arrange the overnight stay, Charlie felt that familiar mix of gratitude and guilt that came with accepting help. Oakley worked long hours as a nurse, managed her growing social media following, and still showed up every time Charlie needed her. Meanwhile, Charlie felt like she contributed nothing but worry to their friendship. "Hey," Oakley said softly, apparently reading her mind again. "Remember that time you stayed up all night helping me study for my NCLEX exam? You made flashcards and bought me those expensive energy drinks that tasted like liquid cotton candy. That's different. That was important, life-changing, the thing I needed most at that moment." Oakley's expression was gentle but determined. "This is the same thing, Charlie girl. You'd do it for me without thinking twice." A new nurse appeared, young, efficient, with a name tag that read Jordan. "Ms. Montgomery, we're moving you to a private room for the night." much more comfortable. As they wheeled her bed through the corridors, Charlie caught glimpses of other patients, other stories unfolding in the fluorescent-lit hallways. A couple holding hands outside the NICU, an elderly woman sleeping peacefully while her daughter read beside her. Family everywhere, in all its forms. The private room was quieter, with a window that looked out over the city lights. Oakley immediately set about making herself at home, rearranging the visitor chair and pulling snacks from her oversized purse like she was setting up camp. "Okay, real talk time," Oakley said once they were settled. "How are you really doing? And don't give me the fine answer you give everyone else." Charlie stared out the window, watching the lights of Queens twinkle in the distance. Somewhere out there was her apartment, her life, the carefully constructed routine that made her feel like she had control over something. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Not just about tonight, but about everything. What if I can't do this alone? What if—" The words caught in her throat as the door opened again. Charlie looked up, expecting another nurse or doctor. Instead, she found herself staring into familiar blue-gray eyes that had haunted her dreams for 6 months. Dr. Matthias Alexander Blackwell stood frozen in the doorway, his usually perfect composure cracking as he took in the sight of her in the hospital bed, his unborn child growing inside her, the reality he'd tried to escape standing right in front of him. "Our Charlie," he breathed, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and an apology all at once. Time stopped moving the way it was supposed to. Charlie stared at Matthias standing in her doorway, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. He looked exactly the same, tall, immaculate, with that perfectly styled blonde hair and those blue-gray eyes that used to make her feel like the only person in the world. But now those same eyes carried something she'd never seen before, genuine fear. "What are you doing here?" The words came out sharper than Charlie intended, but 6 months of hurt had crystallized into something harder than surprise. Matthias stepped into the room slowly, like he was approaching a wounded animal. His scrubs were perfectly pressed, his movement controlled, but Charlie caught the slight tremor in his hands as he glanced at her monitor readings. I'm covering the night shift in obstetrics this week," he said quietly. "Dr. Reyes asked me to check on a patient with elevated blood pressure and anxiety complications." His voice caught almost imperceptibly. "I had no idea it was you." Oakley, who had been uncharacteristically silent, suddenly stood up with the energy of a lioness protecting her cub. "Oh, hell no. You have got to be kidding me right now." "Oakley," Charlie warned, but her friend was already in full protective mode. 6 months. Matthias. 6 months of radio silence. And now you show up when she's lying in a hospital bed. Oakley's voice carried the kind of controlled fury that made her more dangerous than if she were screaming. "Do you have any idea what she's been through? What you put her through?" "I know," Matthias said, and the simplicity of his admission seemed to deflate some of Oakley's anger. "I know I don't have the right to be here. I know I don't deserve to be the one monitoring her care, but I am here, and she needs medical attention, and right now that has to matter more than our history." Charlie watched this exchange like a spectator at her own life. The father of her child was standing 3 feet away, discussing her medical care while carefully avoiding looking directly at her growing belly. The surreal nature of it made her feel disconnected from her own body. "Our history," she repeated, tasting the words. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Matthias finally met her eyes fully, and Charlie saw something that surprised her. Genuine remorse. Not the polite regret of someone caught in an awkward situation, but the deep, aching kind of sorry that comes from knowing you've broken something precious. "Charlie, I don't." She held up a hand, surprised by her own steadiness. "Don't say whatever carefully rehearsed apology you've been practicing. Not here. Not like this." The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of the monitors and the distant sounds of the hospital at night. Charlie became acutely aware of everything. The scratchy hospital gown against her skin, Oakley's protective stance beside her bed, the way Matthias's presence filled the room with unresolved tension. "I need to check your vitals," Matthias said finally, his voice professional but strained. "And review your chart. If you'd prefer, I can call another doctor." "No." The word surprised Charlie as much as it surprised them. "You're here. The baby needs monitoring. Personal feelings don't change medical facts." She watched Matthias struggle with this permission, this unexpected grace. He approached the bed slowly, pulling on gloves with the careful precision she remembered from watching him get ready for work. But his hands shook slightly as he reached for her chart. Blood pressure is 140/95, he read aloud, his professional mask sliding into place, heart rate elevated but steady, baby's heartbeat strong at 150 BPM. He paused, his eyes softening almost imperceptibly. When did you last feel movement? About an hour ago. Strong kicks, actually, especially when the anxiety peaked. Charlie found herself slipping into clinical detachment too, as if discussing someone else's pregnancy. Matthias nodded, making notes. That's good. Responsive movement is what we want to see. He hesitated, then asked quietly, have you been eating regularly? Sleeping. The concern in his voice was so familiar, so achingly reminiscent of the man who used to bring her soup when she worked late, that Charlie felt her careful composure crack slightly. I eat, she said. I sleep when the baby lets me. I do everything the books say to do, Matthias. I take care of both of us. The emphasis on both hung in the air like an accusation. Matthias's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and Charlie knew he'd heard the subtext. I take care of us because you didn't. I'd like to run another blood pressure check in an hour, he said, his voice carefully neutral, and we'll monitor overnight for any changes. If everything stabilizes, you should be able to go home tomorrow morning. That's it? Oakley interjected, her voice sharp with disbelief. You're just going to act like this is a normal doctor-patient interaction? Matthias looked at Oakley, then back at Charlie. What would you have me do? She needs medical care. I'm qualified to provide it. Everything else. He trailed off, the unfinished sentence heavy with everything they weren't saying. Everything else matters, Charlie said quietly. You don't get to walk away from someone and then pretend concern 6 months later when it's convenient for you professionally. You think this is convenient for me? Matthias's careful control slipped slightly. You think walking into this room and seeing you? Seeing? His eyes dropped to her belly for the first time, and Charlie watched him take in the reality of how much had changed, how much he'd missed. Seeing what? Matthias? Your child? The situation you suggested I take care of. The words hit him like a physical blow. Charlie watched his face pale, watched him struggle with the weight of what he'd said all those months ago. I never meant. Yes, you did. Charlie's voice was steady, but tears she hadn't felt coming began to slide down her cheeks. You meant exactly what you said. This was a problem to be solved, not a family to be built. Matthias stood frozen, his professional composure completely shattered. Charlie, get out. The words came out as a whisper, but they carried the weight of 6 months of pain. Just get out. Send another doctor. Anyone else. Charlie, now. Matthias looked like he wanted to say 1,000 things, but he simply nodded and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold, his back to them. For what it's worth, he said without turning around. I think about you every day, both of you. Then he was gone, leaving Charlie and Oakley alone with the weight of everything that had just happened and everything that remained unsaid. Oakley immediately moved to the bed, pulling Charlie into a careful hug that avoided disturbing the monitors. Well, she said after a long moment, that was intense even by our standards. Charlie laughed through her tears, surprising herself. That's one way to put it. But as the night settled around them, Charlie couldn't stop thinking about the look in Matthias's eyes when he'd finally seen her belly, seen the undeniable reality of the life they'd created together. For the first time in 6 months, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. Sleep was impossible when your heart was having a civil war with itself. Charlie lay in the narrow hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles and counting the small holes in each square. 47, 48, 49. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor had become white noise hours ago, but her mind refused to quiet down. Oakley had finally dozed off in the fold-out chair around 2 a.m., her blonde hair spilling over the thin hospital pillow she'd sweet-talked from a sympathetic nurse. Even in sleep, she kept one protective hand stretched toward Charlie's bed, as if ready to spring into action at the first sign of trouble. I think about you every day, both of you. Matthias's words echoed in the darkness, and Charlie pressed her palm against her belly where the baby had been restless for the past hour, little flutters and kicks that felt like butterfly wings, or maybe tiny fists of protest. I know, sweetheart, she whispered into the quiet room. I'm confused too. The door opened softly, and Charlie tensed, expecting another nurse with medication or vitals checks. Instead, Dr. Patricia Reyes stepped in. moving with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to working through the night. Can't sleep? Dr. Reyes approached the bed with a gentle smile. That's completely normal after the kind of day you've had. Is it normal for your baby's father to be your attending physician? Charlie asked, then immediately felt embarrassed by the raw honesty. Dr. Reyes pulled up a chair, settling in with the patience of someone who'd heard every possible combination of human complications. I've been practicing obstetrics for 15 years. Ms. Montgomery, trust me when I say your situation, while emotionally complex, isn't medically unprecedented. How do you handle it? Professionally, I mean. By remembering that my job is to ensure you and your baby are healthy and safe. Everything else, every personal history, every emotional complication, comes second to that priority. Dr. Reyes glanced at Charlie's monitor readings. Your blood pressure has been stable for the past 3 hours. That's excellent news. Charlie nodded, feeling some of the tension in her shoulders ease. Dr. Reyes, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think Dr. Blackwell is a good doctor? The question surprised them both. Dr. Reyes considered it carefully before answering. Professionally, he's exceptional, thorough, knowledgeable, genuinely cares about his patients' outcomes. He completed his residency at Cedars-Sinai with some of the highest recommendations I've ever seen. She paused. But you're not really asking about his medical skills, are you? I don't know what I'm asking, Charlie admitted. 6 months ago, I thought I knew who he was. Now I don't know anything. People are complicated, especially when they're scared. And from what I observed tonight, that man is terrified. Of what? Of you, of the situation, of himself, most likely. Dr. Reyes stood, checking Charlie's IV line with practiced efficiency. Fear makes people do things they never thought they'd do. Both terrible things and unexpectedly brave things. After Dr. Reyes left, Charlie found herself staring out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Matthias was probably awake too, maybe staring at his own ceiling, maybe thinking about the same conversation that was keeping her up. Her phone buzzed softly on the bedside table. A text message from an unknown number. Though she recognized it immediately. I know I don't have the right to ask, but are you okay? Your blood pressure readings came back stable. Dr. Reyes says you can likely go home tomorrow. Charlie stared at the message for a long time. Her first instinct was to delete it, to maintain the wall of silence that had protected her for 6 months. But something about the careful, professional tone, the way he was hiding behind medical facts made her fingers move across the screen before she could stop herself. How did you get this number? The response came quickly, like he'd been waiting with his phone in hand. It's in your emergency contact information. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used it for personal contact. You're right. You shouldn't have. She hit send, then immediately regretted the harshness. But before she could send a follow-up, another message appeared. I understand if you never want to see me again. But Charlie, I need you to know that what I said 6 months ago, about taking care of the situation, that was the worst thing I've ever said to another human being. I've regretted it every single day since. Charlie's hands shook as she read the message. This was the conversation she'd imagined having 100 times in her head, but she'd never expected it to happen over text messages in a hospital room at 3 a.m. Regret doesn't change anything. You still said it. You still left. I know. I was scared. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. I was scared of being responsible for someone else's life. Scared of not being good enough. Scared of ruining everything the way my father ruined our family. Charlie's breath caught. Matthias had never talked about his father's affair, the quiet scandal that had broken his parents' marriage when he was in medical school. She'd learned about it through passing comments from his mother, pieces of a puzzle she'd never quite assembled. Being scared doesn't give you the right to hurt people. No, it doesn't. But Charlie, seeing you tonight, seeing how strong you've been, how you've handled everything I ran away from, I realize I didn't just lose you. I lost the chance to become the man you deserved. Charlie stared at the message until the words blurred. Across the room, Oakley stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible before settling back into peaceful breathing. I can't do this conversation right now. I'm exhausted. I'm scared about the baby, and I don't have the emotional energy to process your regrets. I understand. I'm sorry for texting. Get some rest. But Charlie found herself typing again, unable to let the conversation end there. Matthias? Yes. When you looked at my belly tonight, what did you think? The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times before his response came through. I thought about how much I've missed. I thought about how you've been carrying our child alone while I've been pretending distance would make it hurt less. I thought about how beautiful you look, even in a hospital gown, even when you hate me. And I thought about how our baby is going to be born into a world where their father is a coward who walked away from the best thing that ever happened to him. Charlie pressed her phone against her chest, feeling her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with anxiety and everything to do with the impossible hope she'd been trying to suppress for 6 months. I don't hate you. I hate what you did. There's a difference. Is there room for that difference to matter? Charlie stared at the message for a long time, watching her baby move beneath her skin, thinking about forgiveness and second chances, and whether some wounds could actually heal. I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow. She turned off her phone without waiting for a response and finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of tiny hands reaching for 2 hearts that had forgotten how to beat in rhythm. Tomorrow came with the smell of terrible hospital coffee and the sound of Oakley arguing with someone in the hallway. Charlie woke slowly, her body stiff from the narrow bed, but feeling more rested than she had in weeks. The morning light filtering through the window was gentle, and for the first time in months, she'd slept without nightmares about labor complications or financial ruin. No, you listen to me. Oakley's voice carried through the partially open door. I don't care what protocol says. She's been through enough emotional trauma in the last 12 hours to power a small city, and if you think I'm letting you waltz in there with your guilty conscience and mess with her head again, you've clearly never met an Irish girl from the Bronx who's had exactly 3 hours of sleep. Charlie smiled despite herself. Oakley in protective mode was a force of nature, and apparently, Matthias was about to experience that firsthand. I understand your concern, came Matthias's measured voice, professional but strained. But I am her attending physician and I need to check her vitals before discharge. Then send another doctor. Problem solved. Oakley, Charlie called out, her voice still rough with sleep. Let him in. The voices in the hallway stopped abruptly. After a moment, Oakley appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and barely contained irritation. You sure about this, Charlie girl? Because I can absolutely keep playing bouncer if you need me to. I'm sure. Charlie pushed herself up in bed, smoothing her hair and trying to look more composed than she felt. Besides, someone needs to clear me for discharge, and hiding from him won't change the fact that he works here. Oakley studied her face for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. Fine, but I'm staying right here, and if he says one thing that upsets you, he's going to discover what it feels like to be strangled with a stethoscope. Matthias entered the room cautiously, like he was walking into a minefield, which, Charlie supposed, he basically was. He looked tired, really tired, with shadows under his eyes that suggested he'd slept about as well as she had. Good morning, he said quietly, his professional mask firmly in place. How are you feeling? Like I spent the night in a hospital, Charlie replied, then immediately softened her tone. Better, though. The baby's been quiet since about 6 a.m. That's normal. Most babies are less active in the early morning. Matthias approached the bed slowly, pulling on gloves with the same careful precision she remembered. May I check your blood pressure? Charlie nodded, extending her arm. His touch was gentle, impersonal, but she couldn't help noticing the slight tremor in his hands as he positioned the cuff. The machine hummed quietly, and they both watched the digital readout with the intensity of people whose entire future might depend on those numbers. 120/78, Matthias announced, and Charlie heard the relief in his professional tone. That's excellent. Much better. So I can go home? Pending a final check of baby's heartbeat. Yes. He reached for the fetal monitor, then paused. Is it? May I? The question was so careful, so loaded with unspoken meaning, that Charlie felt her chest tighten. He was asking permission to listen to their child's heartbeat, something that should have been the most natural thing in the world, but had become a moment requiring consent and courage. Yes, she whispered. Matthias placed the monitor on her belly with reverent care, and immediately the room filled with the steady, rapid whoosh-whoosh of their baby's heartbeat, 150 beats per minute of pure life, undeniable and perfect. Charlie watched Matthias's face as he listened, saw the exact moment when his professional composure cracked. His eyes filled with tears he was clearly trying not to shed, and his free hand moved unconsciously toward her belly before he caught himself and pulled it back. Strong heartbeat, he managed, his voice thick, perfect rhythm. Baby's doing beautifully. The heartbeat continued to fill the room. and Charlie realized this was the first time Matthias had actually heard his child. In all her doctor's appointments, all her midnight worries, all her careful planning for a future as a single mother, this moment had never occurred to her, that there would be a first time for him too. The baby's most active around 10 p.m., she found herself saying, and gets hiccups every day around 3 in the afternoon. They last exactly 7 minutes. Matthias looked up from the monitor, his eyes wide with wonder and pain. 7 minutes? I've timed it. Very punctual, baby. Gets that from you, probably. It was meant to be a light comment, but it landed with unexpected weight. Matthias carefully removed the monitor, his hands shaking slightly as he made notes on her chart. Charlie, he said quietly, not looking at her, the things I said last night, in the texts, I meant every word, but I need you to know that I don't expect anything from you. I don't expect forgiveness or second chances or, what do you expect? Charlie interrupted. The question seemed to surprise him. Nothing. I have no right to expect anything. That's not what I asked. Charlie shifted in the bed, trying to see his face clearly. If you could have anything, if there were no history, no hurt feelings, no complications, what would you want? Matthias was quiet for so long that Charlie thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I'd want to be the father our child deserves. I'd want to earn back the right to love you both. I'd want to undo every moment of the last 6 months and choose courage instead of fear. He finally met her eyes. But wanting something and deserving it are very different things. Oakley, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. Hey Charlie, your discharge papers are ready whenever you want to leave. The spell broke. Matthias stepped back, professional distance sliding back into place like armor. You're cleared for normal activity, but I want you to follow up with your regular OB within the week, he said, his voice steady again. And if you experience any more anxiety-related symptoms, don't hesitate to come back in. Thank you, Charlie said, and meant it. Matthias nodded and headed for the door, but Charlie's voice stopped him. Matthias, that thing you want, being the father our child deserves. She paused, gathering courage. It's not about deserving it. It's about choosing it, every single day, even when it's scary. He turned back to look at her, hope and fear warring in his expression. I know, he said quietly. I'm just not sure I know how to make that choice yet. Then learn, Charlie said simply. Wick, you're a doctor. You're good at learning things. After he left, Oakley helped Charlie get dressed in the clothes she'd brought from home. Soft maternity jeans and the oversized sweater that had become Charlie's uniform for hiding her pregnancy. So, Oakley said as they waited for the wheelchair that would take Charlie to the lobby, on a scale of 1 to completely losing your mind, how are we feeling about Dr. Dreamy Mac-abandonment issues? Charlie laughed, surprising herself. Honestly, I have no idea. 6 months ago, I would have said I never wanted to see him again. Last night, I wanted to throw something at his head. This morning, she trailed off, touching her belly where the baby was starting to wake up. This morning, I'm thinking maybe some people deserve a chance to prove they can change. And maybe some people don't, Oakley said pointedly. Maybe, Charlie agreed. But I guess the only way to find out is to give him the opportunity to show me which kind of person he really is. As they left the hospital, Charlie caught a glimpse of Matthias through the window of the doctor's lounge. He was sitting alone, staring at something in his hands. As they got closer, she realized it was a printout of the baby's heartbeat from this morning, the visual proof that their child was real, healthy, and growing stronger every day. For the first time in 6 months, Charlie wondered if maybe she wasn't the only one who had been scared and alone. Real life was messier than hospital conversations, and Charlie remembered that the moment she walked into her Queens apartment, the sink was full of dishes she'd left before rushing to the hospital. Bills were scattered across her small kitchen table, organized by due date in neat piles that told the story of her careful budgeting. The nursery, really just a corner of her bedroom with a crib still in its box, looked smaller and more overwhelming than ever. Okay, game plan, Oakley announced, dropping Charlie's overnight bag by the door and immediately rolling up her sleeves. You're going to sit on that couch, put your feet up, and let me handle the disaster zone that is your kitchen. Oak, you don't have to. Nope. Doctor's orders were a normal activity, not as pretend last night didn't happen, and stress yourself into another hospital visit. Oakley was already filling the sink with soapy water. Besides, I stress clean. It's therapeutic. Charlie settled onto her second-hand couch, pulling a soft throw blanket over her legs. Her apartment was small, a one-bedroom that cost too much but was in a safe neighborhood with good schools. But it was hers. Every piece of furniture had been carefully chosen for function and affordability, every decoration earned through months of saving. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, a text from an unknown number, though she immediately recognized the careful, formal tone. I hope you made it home safely. Please don't feel obligated to respond. I just wanted you to know that your follow-up appointment has been scheduled with Dr. Martinez for Thursday at 2 p.m. Insurance approved. No copay required. Charlie stared at the message, frowning. No copay required? Her insurance definitely had copays for specialist visits. She'd been carefully budgeting $40 for each appointment. She typed back, "How is there no copay?" The response came quickly. The hospital has a patient assistance program for high-risk pregnancies. You qualify. Charlie's frown deepened. She'd never heard of this program, and she'd specifically asked about financial assistance when she'd first started receiving care at New York Presbyterian. Since when do I qualify? I was told 6 months ago that my income was too high for assistance programs. There was a longer pause before the next message. Programs change. Funding becomes available. You shouldn't have to choose between prenatal care and paying rent. Something about the careful wording made Charlie suspicious. She screenshot the conversation and sent it to Oakley with a message. Does this sound fishy to you? Oakley's response was immediate. Girl, he's paying for it. Charlie's stomach dropped. She called Oakley, who answered on the first ring despite being literally 15 feet away in the kitchen. You think he's paying for my medical bills? Charlie asked without preamble. I think a man who makes $350K a year and has been consumed with guilt for 6 months might find creative ways to help without admitting he's helping, Oakley said, not pausing in her aggressive dish scrubbing. Also, I think you should ask him directly instead of letting yourself spiral about it. Charlie ended the call and immediately dialed the number Matthias had texted from. Hello? His voice was cautious, like he'd been expecting this call. Are you paying for my medical bills? Charlie. Yes or no, Matthias? Are you secretly paying for my prenatal care? A long pause. It's not secret if you figured it out. Oh my God. Charlie felt a surge of anger that surprised her with its intensity. How could you think that was okay? How could you make decisions about my care without telling me? Because I knew you'd react exactly like this, Matthias said quietly. And because you need prenatal care more than you need your pride. My pride? Charlie's voice rose. You think this is about pride? Isn't it? Charlie stood up abruptly, pacing the small living room despite Oakley's concerned look from the kitchen. This is about honesty. It's about respect. It's about not making decisions for me like I'm a child who can't handle her own life. That's exactly what you did. Charlie's voice cracked with emotion. 6 months ago, you decided I couldn't handle being a mother. Now you've decided I can't handle my own medical bills. When do I get to make my own choices about my own life? The silence on the other end of the line stretched uncomfortably long. You're right, Matthias said finally, his voice thick with something that might have been shame. I'm sorry. I thought I was helping, but I was just controlling things again, making decisions that weren't mine to make. Charlie sank back onto the couch, already suddenly exhausted. I don't need you to save me, Matthias. I need you to trust me to save myself. I know that now. I'm learning that. He paused. What can I do? How can I fix this? Stop the payments. Let me handle my own bills. Charlie, those bills are mine, she said firmly. They're mine. The baby is mine. The decisions are mine. If you want to be part of this, you have to stop trying to manage it from a distance. What does being part of it look like? Matthias asked quietly. The question caught Charlie off guard. She'd been so focused on what she didn't want him to do that she hadn't really considered what she might want him to do. I don't know yet, she admitted, but it doesn't look like secret payments and medical decisions made behind my back. Okay, Matthias said. I'll stop the payments. But Charlie, if there's ever a situation where you need help, will you tell me? Will you let me help in a way that doesn't feel like control? Charlie touched her belly, where the baby was doing its afternoon gymnastics routine. I'll think about it. After she hung up, Oakley emerged from the kitchen with 2 cups of tea and an expression that meant business. Okay, let's talk about this, Oakley said, settling onto the couch beside Charlie. Because I love you, and I want to support whatever decision you make. But I need to make sure you're thinking clearly. I am thinking clearly. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're so determined to prove you don't need him that you're not considering whether you might want him. Charlie stared into her tea, watching the steam rise in delicate spirals. What if I do want him? What if I want him to be part of this? And he runs again. Then you'll handle it, Oakley said simply. The same way you've handled everything else. But Charlie, what if he doesn't run? What if he's actually trying to figure out how to stay? People don't change that much, Oak. Some people don't. But some people get scared enough of losing something precious that they find courage they didn't know they had. Oakley reached over and squeezed Charlie's hand. The question is, are you brave enough to find out which kind of person he is? Charlie's phone buzzed with another text from Matthias. The payments have been stopped. Your insurance will handle the bills normally from now on. I'm sorry for overstepping. She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Thank you for respecting my decision." His response came quickly. "It won't happen again. I promise." Charlie showed the exchange to Oakley, who raised an eyebrow. "Huh," Oakley said. "A man who actually listens when you set a boundary. That's refreshingly unusual." "Don't get excited," Charlie warned. "One decent response doesn't erase 6 months of silence." "No," Oakley agreed, "but it might be the beginning of something different." As the afternoon wore on, Charlie found herself thinking about second chances and the difference between earning forgiveness and expecting it. Her grandmother had always said that people showed you who they really were in moments of crisis, not in their words, but in their choices. Matthias had made terrible choices 6 months ago, but his choice to respect her boundaries today, even when it cost him something he thought was helping, maybe that meant something too. Maybe the real question wasn't whether people could change, but whether they were willing to do the hard work of proving they had. The last thing Charlie expected to find outside her apartment building on Thursday morning was Matthias sitting on the front steps with a toolbox and what appeared to be the instruction manual for a crib. She paused at the bottom of the steps, grocery bags weighing down her arms, trying to process the sight of him in jeans and a plain gray t-shirt instead of his usual scrubs or dress clothes. He looked younger somehow, more human, and completely out of place in her working-class Queens neighborhood. "What are you doing here?" she asked, not moving any closer. Matthias looked up from the incomprehensible diagram he'd been studying, his hair slightly messed up and his expression sheepish. "I know this looks presumptuous, and I know you said you could handle things yourself, but..." He gestured helplessly at the instruction manual. "Oakley may have mentioned that you've been avoiding assembling the crib because it looks complicated." Charlie set down her grocery bags, crossing her arms. "Oakley has a big mouth. She also has strong opinions about people who abandon pregnant women," Matthias said quietly. "It took 3 hours of conversation and a promise that I wouldn't upset you for her to even consider telling me about the crib." 3 hours? Charlie couldn't hide her surprise. "She's very thorough when it comes to protecting people she loves. I respect that." Matthias stood up, brushing dust off his jeans. "Look, I know I don't have the right to just show up here, but I also know that assembling furniture is complicated when you're 7 months pregnant, and I'm good with my hands. And I thought maybe..." He trailed off, clearly realizing how presumptuous he sounded. "You thought maybe what?" Charlie prompted. "I thought maybe doing something useful and concrete might be better than sending careful text messages and hoping you'll eventually forgive me." Matthias met her eyes. "I don't want to make decisions for you, Charlie. I want to help you make your own decisions easier." Charlie studied his face, looking for signs of the careful manipulation she'd grown to expect. Instead, she saw genuine nervousness and what might have been hope. "You came all the way to Queens to build a crib." "I took the day off work to come to Queens to build a crib," Matthias corrected. "If you'll let me." Charlie glanced at her grocery bags, then at Matthias, then at the instruction manual that looked like it had been written in several languages, none of them English. "I have a follow-up appointment at 2 p.m., she said finally. "I know. Dr. Martinez. I could drive you if you want, or I could be finished and gone by then. Whatever you prefer." The offer was so carefully neutral, so free of pressure, that Charlie felt some of her defensive walls crack slightly. "You can build the crib," she said, "but we need to talk while you do it." Relief flashed across Matthias's features. Of course. Charlie's apartment felt smaller with Matthias in it, but not uncomfortably so. He moved carefully through her space, clearly trying not to disturb her careful organization, and Charlie found herself appreciating his awareness of being a guest, rather than assuming belonging. The crib box had been taunting her from the corner of her bedroom for 3 weeks. Every time she looked at it, she felt overwhelmed by the complexity of the instructions and the symbolism of actually setting up a space for her baby. It made everything feel more real, more permanent, more terrifying. "Okay," Matthias said, spreading the pieces across her living room floor with methodical precision. "This is definitely going to take a while." "Good," Charlie said, settling onto the couch with a cup of tea. "Because I have questions." Matthias looked up from sorting screws by size. "Ask me anything. Where have you been for 6 months? Really? Not just physically, but where have you been in your head?" Matthias's hand stilled over the hardware. "Los Angeles, finishing my fellowship in high-risk obstetrics." He laughed bitterly. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was learning to save other people's babies while running away from my own. "Why obstetrics?" Charlie asked. "You could have specialized in anything." "Because I wanted to help families. Because I thought if I could save other people's children, maybe I could prove to myself that I was capable of being responsible for a life." He picked up a wooden slat, examining it carefully. "Turns out, learning to deliver babies safely and learning to be a father are completely different skills." Charlie watched him work, noting the careful precision of his movements, the way he double-checked each step against the instructions. "What made you come back?" "Dr. Brennan, my supervisor in LA, asked me why I was working 80-hour weeks and sleeping in the hospital." Matthias began connecting the crib's side panels with slow, methodical care. "I told him I was dedicated to my work. He said I looked like a man running from something that was going to catch up with me eventually." Smart man. Very smart. He also said that the best obstetricians he knew were the ones who understood that bringing life into the world was about love, not just medical knowledge. Matthias paused, looking directly at Charlie. "He asked me what I was so afraid of loving that I'd rather live on the other side of the country." The crib was starting to take shape, and Charlie could envision her baby sleeping in it, could imagine morning feedings and late-night diaper changes and all the tiny, important moments she'd been planning for alone. "What did you tell him?" she asked quietly. "The truth, that I was afraid of failing the 2 most important people in my life. That I'd already failed you once and I was terrified of doing it again." Matthias's voice was steady, but Charlie could see the tension in his shoulders. He said fear was normal, but running was a choice. "So you chose to come back." "I chose to come back and try to become someone worthy of a second chance, even if that second chance never comes." Charlie was quiet while Matthias attached the crib's adjustable mattress support. The baby kicked sharply, and she winced slightly, pressing her hand to the spot. "You okay?" Matthias asked immediately, his medical training overriding everything else. "Just a strong kick. Baby's been more active since yesterday." Charlie shifted on the couch, trying to find a comfortable position. "Dr. Martinez said that's normal at this stage." "Dr. Martinez is excellent. You'll like her." Matthias returned to his work, but Charlie caught him glancing at her belly with undisguised longing. "You can ask," she said softly. "Ask what?" "Whatever you're thinking about asking." Matthias set down his screwdriver, his hand suddenly uncertain. Would it be okay if I felt the baby kick? Just once." The question was so carefully hopeful that Charlie felt her heart crack slightly. "Come here." Matthias approached the couch like he was approaching something sacred. Charlie took his hand and placed it on her belly where the baby had been most active. For a moment, nothing happened, and Charlie worried the baby had chosen this moment to take a nap. Then, a strong, definitive kick directly against Matthias's palm. His face transformed completely. Wonder, joy, and pain mixed together in an expression so raw that Charlie had to look away. When she looked back, tears were streaming down his face. "That's our baby," he whispered, his voice broken with awe. "That's our baby," Charlie confirmed, and for the first time in 6 months, the word "our" felt true. They stayed like that for several minutes, Matthias's hand on her belly, both of them marveling at the life they'd created together. When the baby settled down, Matthias reluctantly moved his hand away. "Thank you," he said simply. "Matthias." Charlie waited until he met her eyes. "I need you to understand something. If you're going to be part of this, if you're going to be in our child's life, you can't run again, ever, no matter how scared you get, no matter how hard it becomes. Because I can handle being a single mother, but I cannot handle our child growing up wondering why their father keeps leaving." "I understand," Matthias said seriously. "And I won't run. Not from this. Not from you, not from our child, I promise. Promises are easy to make when you're not scared yet. Then let me prove it to you, Matthias said. However long it takes, whatever I need to do, let me prove that some people really can change. Charlie looked at the nearly completed crib, then at Matthias kneeling on her living room floor surrounded by instruction manuals and scattered screws, his expensive clothes dusty and his face hopeful. Okay, she said quietly, but we start slow, and you follow my lead. Anything, Matthias said immediately. Whatever you need. I need you to finish that crib first, Charlie said with a small smile, because looking at those instructions makes me want to take a nap, and that can't be normal. Matthias laughed, the first real laugh Charlie had heard from him in months, and got back to work. As he tightened the final screws and tested the crib's stability, Charlie found herself imagining a future that looked different from the carefully planned single motherhood she'd been preparing for. It was terrifying and hopeful in equal measure, which seemed about right for any future worth having. 3 weeks later, Charlie discovered that starting slow with Matthias meant finding him in the hospital cafeteria at 7 a.m., looking like he'd been waiting for her to arrive for work. This is getting weird, she announced, sliding into the seat across from him with her decaf coffee and whole grain muffin. You don't even work the day shift. Matthias looked up from his own breakfast. Black coffee and what appeared to be a protein bar he'd methodically cut into precise pieces. I switched my schedule. Days are better for, he gestured vaguely toward her belly, for being available if you need anything. Matthias, we talked about this. You can't reorganize your entire life around my pregnancy. I'm not reorganizing my life around your pregnancy, he said carefully. I'm reorganizing my life around the fact that I want to be a present father, and present fathers don't work nights when their pregnant partners might need them. Charlie nearly choked on her coffee. Partners. The word hung between them like a question neither of them was ready to answer fully. Matthias's cheeks reddened slightly. Poor word choice, he said quickly. I meant co-parents, future co-parents, people who are figuring things out together. Charlie took another sip of coffee, studying his face. And this sudden schedule change has nothing to do with the fact that Oakley told you I've been having trouble sleeping. Matthias's guilty expression was answer enough. She's worried about you, he said defensively. And frankly, so am I. When's the last time you got a full night's sleep? When's the last time any pregnant woman in her 3rd trimester got a full night's sleep? Charlie countered. It's normal, Matthias. I'm not fragile. I know you're not fragile. But you're also 32 weeks pregnant and working full-time and trying to prepare for single motherhood. And maybe, just maybe, you don't have to do all of that completely alone anymore. The sincerity in his voice caught Charlie off guard. Over the past 3 weeks, Matthias had been nothing if not consistent. He'd texted her good morning every day, but never pushed for responses. He'd shown up to build a bookshelf she'd mentioned needing, but left immediately afterward without trying to extend the visit. He'd sent her articles about prenatal nutrition, but always with the caveat that she should ignore them if they felt like overstepping. It was like he was learning to care without controlling, and Charlie wasn't sure how to handle this new version of him. I have a doctor's appointment this afternoon, she said finally, with Dr. Martinez. If you think it would be helpful to be there. Matthias's face lit up like she'd offered him the world. Really? You'd want me there? I'd want you to hear what the doctor says, about the baby's development, about delivery planning, that kind of thing. Charlie felt heat rise in her cheeks. If we're going to be co-parents, you should probably know what you're co-parenting. Charlie, Matthias said quietly. Thank you. That means more to me than you know. They finished breakfast in comfortable silence, and Charlie found herself studying Matthias when he wasn't looking. The past few weeks had changed him in subtle ways. He looked less rigid, less like he was constantly bracing for disaster. His hair was slightly less perfect, his clothes more casual, his movements more relaxed. She was so absorbed in her observations that she almost missed Oakley's dramatic entrance into the cafeteria. There you are, Oakley announced, plopping down next to Charlie with the energy of someone who'd already had too much caffeine. I've been looking everywhere for you. It's 7:15 a.m. Oak. Where else would I be? I don't know. Maybe at home sleeping like a normal person. Oakley glanced between Charlie and Matthias with undisguised curiosity. So, this is happening now? Breakfast dates? It's not a date, Charlie said quickly. We just happened to be here at the same time. For the 3rd time this week, Oakley pointed out with a grin. But sure, total coincidence. Matthias looked like he wanted to disappear into his coffee cup. "I should get to my rounds," he said, standing abruptly. "Charlie, what time is your appointment this afternoon?" 2:30. "I'll meet you in the waiting area at 2:15. The question was hopeful but careful, like he was still learning to ask for things instead of assuming them. "Sounds good," Charlie said, and was surprised by how much she meant it. After Matthias left, Oakley immediately leaned across the table with the predatory smile that meant she was about to meddle. "Okay, spill. What's really happening here?" "Nothing's happening. He's trying to be supportive without being overbearing, and I'm trying to figure out if he means it." "And?" Charlie sighed, absently rubbing her belly where the baby was doing morning stretches. "And I think he might actually mean it, which is terrifying, because it's easier to plan for disappointment than it is to hope for something good." Oakley's expression softened. "Charlie girl, you know I'll support whatever you decide. But can I say something? When have I ever been able to stop you? I've been watching him these past few weeks. The way he looks at you, the way he talks about the baby, the way he's been showing up without making demands." Oakley paused, choosing her words carefully. "But I think he's falling in love with both of you, and I think he's terrified you'll notice." Charlie felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the baby's movements. "It's too soon to be thinking about love. We're still figuring out how to be in the same room without arguing. Are you, though? Because from where I'm sitting, you two looked pretty comfortable just now." Before Charlie could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Matthias. "Thank you for letting me come to the appointment today. I promise I'll just listen and follow your lead." Charlie showed the message to Oakley, who raised an eyebrow. "Just saying," Oakley said with a knowing smile. "When's the last time a man thanked you for the privilege of being involved in his own child's life?" The question stayed with Charlie through her morning of spreadsheets and client calls. By the time 2:15 rolled around, she was more nervous than she'd expected to be. Having Matthias at a doctor's appointment felt significant in a way that building cribs and sharing breakfast didn't. It felt like an acknowledgement that they were in this together, however complicated this might be. She found him in the waiting area, dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt instead of scrubs, looking almost as nervous as she felt. "Ready?" she asked. "More than ready," he said, standing to walk beside her toward the appointment. "Charlie, whatever happens in there, whatever the doctor says, I want you to know that I'm grateful to be here, to be included." "Matthias," Charlie said as they approached the examination room, "you're not being included. You're the father. This is your right as much as it is mine." The smile that spread across his face was so genuine, so full of wonder and relief, that Charlie felt her carefully constructed walls crack just a little bit more. Maybe Oakley was right. Maybe some risks were worth taking, especially when the alternative was spending the rest of her life wondering what might have been possible if she'd been brave enough to find out. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Martinez announced, moving the ultrasound wand across Charlie's gel-covered belly. "Baby's measuring right on track, heartbeat is strong, and..." She paused, studying the screen with a smile. "Audi, would you like to know what you're having?" Charlie's breath caught. She'd been avoiding finding out the baby's sex, partly because it felt like something she should decide with the father, and partly because not knowing had felt like one less thing to get emotional about during doctor visits. She glanced at Matthias, who was staring at the ultrasound screen with such intense fascination that she wondered if he'd forgotten to blink. His hand hovered near hers on the examination table, close enough to touch but careful not to assume permission. "What do you think?" Charlie asked him softly. Matthias tore his gaze away from the screen, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's your choice. Whatever you want to know, I want to know. Whatever you want to keep as a surprise, I can wait." The thoughtfulness of his response, the way he automatically deferred to her preferences, made Charlie's chest tight with emotion. "I want to know," she said. "We want to know." Dr. Martinez smiled and adjusted the screen so they could both see clearly. "Congratulations. You're having a daughter." The words hit Charlie like a gentle earthquake. A daughter. She was carrying a little girl who would inherit her grandmother's green eyes. Maybe, or Matthias's methodical mind, or something entirely her own. A daughter who would grow up knowing she was wanted, even if her parents were still figuring out how to want each other. She looked at Matthias and saw tears streaming down his face, his medical composure completely abandoned. "A daughter," he whispered, his voice broken with awe. "Oh, we're having a daughter. She's beautiful," Dr. Martinez said. pointing to features on the screen. 10 fingers, 10 toes, strong heart. She's going to be quite the little fighter, based on how active she's been today. Charlie watched Matthias study every detail of their daughter's image, memorizing the curve of her tiny nose and the way her hand was curled near her face. She realized this was the first time he was truly seeing their child, not just as a concept or a responsibility, but as a real person they'd created together. Is it possible to get pictures? Matthias asked Dr. Martinez, then immediately looked at Charlie. If that's okay with you. Of course it's okay, Charlie said gently. She's your daughter too. The appointment continued with discussions of delivery plans and third trimester expectations, but Charlie found herself watching Matthias more than listening to medical details. He asked thoughtful questions about labor positions and pain management options, took careful notes about warning signs to watch for, and listened with the intense focus of someone determined not to miss a single important detail. Any questions for me, Doctor? Martinez asked as she finished up. Just one, Charlie said. Is it normal to feel like everything just became more real, more immediate? Dr. Martinez laughed. Completely normal. Finding out the sex often does that to parents. Suddenly the baby isn't just the baby, she's your daughter, with her own personality and future ahead of her. As they left the appointment, Charlie clutched the ultrasound photos, while Matthias walked beside her in what seemed like stunned silence. You okay? She asked when they reached the hospital parking lot. Matthias stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression that was equal parts wonder and terror. Charlie, I'm going to be someone's father, someone's dad. There's going to be a little girl who depends on me to keep her safe and teach her about the world, and he ran his hands through his hair, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking completely. What if I'm terrible at it? The vulnerability in his voice made Charlie's heart ache. Matthias, look at me. He met her eyes, his face open and afraid in a way she'd never seen before. The fact that you're worried about being a good father probably means you will be one, she said. Bad fathers don't lose sleep wondering if they're good enough. How can you be so sure? Because I've been watching you for the past month. You learned to ask instead of assuming. You learned to respect my boundaries even when you disagreed with them. You've shown up consistently without making demands. Charlie touched his arm gently. Those are exactly the qualities our daughter is going to need from her dad. Matthias covered her hand with his own, his touch warm and steady. Our daughter. I love how that sounds. Me too, Charlie admitted, and realized she meant it completely. They stood there in the afternoon sunlight, both holding ultrasound pictures of their daughter, and Charlie felt something shift between them. Not into romantic love, that was still too complicated, too fragile, but into something deeper, partnership, maybe, or simply the recognition that they were bound together now by something more important than their own fears. Charlie, Matthias said quietly, I know we're taking things slowly, and I know I don't have the right to ask for more than you're ready to give, but would you consider letting me take you to dinner? Not as a date, he added quickly, but as two people who are about to become parents and should probably talk about what that means. Charlie studied his face, looking for signs of pressure or manipulation. Instead, she saw genuine nervousness and hope. Dinner sounds nice, she said, but I picked the restaurant, somewhere with good parking and no stairs because your daughter has been using my bladder as a soccer ball all day. Matthias's laugh was bright and genuine. Anything you want? As long as I get to hear you call her my daughter again. Our daughter, Charlie corrected with a smile. She's ours, Matthias. Whatever else we figure out, she's ours. As they walked toward their cars, Charlie caught herself imagining conversations they might have over dinner, about names and nursery decorations and whether their daughter would inherit Matthias's love of organization or Charlie's stubborn independence. For the first time in months, planning for the future felt less like bracing for disaster and more like building something beautiful. It was still terrifying, but maybe the best things in life were supposed to be a little scary. Maybe that's how you knew they mattered enough to be worth the risk. Italian food, Charlie called out as she reached her car. 7 o'clock? And Matthias? Yeah? Bring pictures of yourself as a baby. I want to see what we're in for. His smile could have powered the entire hospital. Sometimes life changes direction in the middle of chicken parmesan. Charlie was laughing at a baby picture of Matthias, all serious expression and perfectly combed hair even at age 3, when the first contraction hit. Not the gentle Braxton Hicks she'd been experiencing for weeks, but something deeper, more purposeful, that made her fork clatter against her plate. Charlie? Matthias looked up from his own meal, immediately alert. What's wrong? Charlie breathed through the tightening sensation, counting seconds the way she'd learned in her birthing class. I think that was a real contraction. Matthias's face went perfectly still, his medical training taking over. How long did it last? About 30 seconds. Charlie checked her phone. But I'm only 34 weeks. It's too early. This can't be. Another contraction gripped her, stronger than the first, and Charlie found herself gripping the edge of the table as her daughter announced her intention to arrive ahead of schedule. Okay, Matthias said, his voice calm despite the panic Charlie could see in his eyes. We're going to the hospital. Right now. But the dinner. Forget the dinner. Matthias was already signaling their waitress, throwing cash on the table with shaking hands. Charlie, can you walk? I think so. But as Charlie tried to stand, fluid gushed down her legs, soaking through her maternity dress and onto the restaurant floor. Oh God, my water just broke. The restaurant around them seemed to freeze for a moment. Other diners turning to stare at the pregnant woman standing in a puddle of amniotic fluid, looking terrified and slightly embarrassed. It's okay, Matthias said firmly, taking her arm. And everything's going to be okay. We're going to have a baby tonight. The ride to New York Presbyterian was a blur of contractions every 3 minutes and Matthias talking her through breathing exercises while navigating Queens traffic with the skill of someone who'd made this drive in emergencies before. Too fast, Charlie gasped between contractions. This is happening too fast. She's not supposed to come for 6 more weeks. Babies don't read calendars, Matthias said, though Charlie could hear the worry he was trying to hide. 34 weeks is early, but not dangerously early. She's going to be fine. You're both going to be fine. By the time they reached the hospital, Charlie's contractions were 2 minutes apart, and she was questioning every life choice that had led to this moment. The triage nurse took one look at her and immediately called for a wheelchair. Looks like we're having a baby tonight, Dr. Reyes announced after examining Charlie in the delivery room. This little girl has decided she's ready to meet her parents. Is she going to be okay? Charlie asked, gripping Matthias's hand with enough force to cut off circulation. Being born this early? 34 weeks is considered late preterm. She'll likely need some time in the NICU to develop her lungs fully, but the prognosis is excellent, Dr. Reyes explained. The question is, are you both ready for this? Charlie looked at Matthias, really looked at him, and saw her own terror reflected in his eyes. But she also saw something else. Determination, love, and the kind of fierce protectiveness she'd only dreamed he might feel for their daughter. No, Charlie said honestly, we're not ready, but I guess we're doing this anyway. The next 6 hours blurred together in a haze of pain, exhaustion, and the most intense experience of Charlie's life. Matthias never left her side, holding her hand through every contraction, helping her breathe through every wave of pain, whispering encouragement when she was sure she couldn't continue. I can't do this, Charlie gasped during a particularly brutal contraction. I'm not strong enough. Yes, you are, Matthias said firmly, brushing sweaty hair away from her face. You're the strongest person I know. You've been preparing for this moment for months, and you're going to be incredible. What if something goes wrong? What if she's too small? What if... Hey, Matthias made her look at him, his eyes serious but gentle. Whatever happens, we face it together. You're not alone in this anymore. The word together hit Charlie like a revelation. Sometime during the chaos of early labor and medical preparations, they'd stopped being two people figuring out co-parenting and become a team, a family. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I, Matthias admitted. But I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. At 3:47 a.m., after 18 hours of labor and 6 months of preparing to do everything alone, Charlotte Montgomery gave birth to Lily Rose Blackwell Montgomery, weighing 4 pounds and 12 ounces. With her father's serious expression and her mother's determined chin, the moment Dr. Reyes placed their daughter on Charlie's chest, tiny and perfect and breathing on her own despite being 6 weeks early, everything else in the world seemed to disappear. Charlie looked down at Lily's impossibly small face and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. She's perfect, Matthias whispered, tears streaming down his face as he gently touched their daughter's tiny hand. Hey, Charlie, she's absolutely perfect. Lily opened her eyes, gray-blue like her father's, and seemed to study both of their faces with the serious concentration of someone taking careful note of the people responsible for bringing her into the world. "Hi, baby girl," Charlie whispered, her own tears falling freely. "We've been waiting so long to meet you." "She's so small," Matthias said, his voice filled with wonder and worry. "Are you sure she's okay?" "Her vitals are excellent," Dr. Reyes assured them. "She'll need to stay in the NICU for monitoring and to help her lungs develop fully, but she's breathing well on her own. That's a very good sign for a 34-week baby." As the nurses prepared to take Lily to the NICU, Matthias looked at Charlie with an expression she'd never seen before, gratitude so profound it seemed to change the shape of his face. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me be here, for giving me the chance to be her father, for—" He trailed off, apparently unable to find words big enough for what he was feeling. "Matthias," Charlie said, exhausted but clear-eyed, "you don't have to thank me for being part of your daughter's life. You just have to show up. Every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Matthias agreed. "Charlie, I know we haven't talked about what this means for us, for our relationship, but I need you to know something." Charlie waited, still holding Lily's tiny hand. "I'm in love with you," Matthias said simply. "I've been in love with you since the first time I saw you organize your desk by color and efficiency. I was too scared to admit it 6 months ago, and too ashamed to say it when I came back. But sitting here, watching you bring our daughter into the world, being brave when I was too cowardly to stay." He took a shaky breath. "I love you both more than I thought it was possible to love anything." Charlie looked at him. This man who had run away from her, who had spent months learning to come back, who had just witnessed her at her most vulnerable and looked at her like she was performing miracles. "Ask me again in 6 months," she said softly, "when we've both had time to figure out how to be parents. When you've proven you can handle 2 a.m. feedings and diaper blowouts and all the unglamorous parts of loving someone." Matthias smiled, the kind of smile that held promises and patience in equal measure. "I'll ask you every day for the rest of our lives if that's what it takes." As they wheeled Lily to the NICU and Charlie to recovery, she found herself thinking about second chances and the difference between deserving love and choosing it every day. Maybe some mistakes were too big to forgive, but maybe some people were brave enough to become worthy of the forgiveness they'd been given. Only time would tell which kind of person Matthias really was. But for the first time in months, Charlie was looking forward to finding out. 6 months later, the sound of Lily's laughter echoing through Prospect Park on a crisp October morning was the kind of music Charlie never knew she'd been missing her entire life. At 10 months old, Lily Rose Blackwell Montgomery was a force of nature disguised as 22 pounds of chubby cheeks and determined curiosity. She had inherited her father's serious expression when concentrating, currently focused on demolishing a piece of banana with scientific precision, and her mother's stubborn streak when it came to getting what she wanted. "She's going to be walking by Christmas," Matthias observed, watching Lily pull herself up against the park bench with the kind of focused determination that suggested she had places to go and people to see. "She's going to be running by Christmas," Charlie corrected, catching Lily as she let go of the bench and immediately reached for a leaf that was completely out of her range. "Yesterday, she figured out how to open the baby-proofed cabinets. I found her in the kitchen at 6 a.m. surrounded by Tupperware, looking very pleased with herself." Matthias laughed, the sound warm and familiar in a way that still surprised Charlie sometimes. Over the past 6 months, she'd learned the difference between the careful, controlled version of Matthias she'd fallen for originally, and this newer version, messier, more real, covered in baby food more often than not, but infinitely more present. "Speaking of kitchen disasters," Matthias said, pulling a small wrapped box from his jacket pocket, "I have something for you." "It's not my birthday," Charlie said, immediately suspicious, "and it's definitely not a holiday that requires gifts. It's the 6-month anniversary of you telling me to ask you again in 6 months," Matthias said simply. Charlie's heart did something complicated in her chest. She'd been dreading and anticipating this conversation in equal measure, knowing it was coming but not sure she was ready for whatever question he was planning to ask. "Matthias, before you panic," he said quickly, "it's not what you think it is." "Well, it's not only what you think it is." Charlie took the box with trembling fingers, aware that Lily was watching this entire exchange with the focused attention of someone who was learning that grown-ups did strange and important things that involved small boxes. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with 3 small charms, a tiny stethoscope, a small heart with LR engraved on it, and a delicate infinity symbol. "It's beautiful," Charlie whispered, running her finger over the charms. "The stethoscope is for the night we met again," Matthias explained. "The heart with Lily's initials is for the day she was born and everything changed. And the infinity symbol," he paused, taking a deep breath. "And that's for however long you'll let me keep proving I'm worthy of both of you." Charlie looked up from the bracelet to find Matthias watching her with the kind of patient hope that had become his signature expression over the past months. "I'm not asking you to marry me," he continued. "Not yet. I'm asking if you think we might be heading toward forever. If you think what we've built together is worth continuing to build." Charlie looked around the park, at the families sharing picnic lunches, at the couples walking hand in hand, at the children running and laughing while their parents watched with expressions of exhausted joy. 6 months ago, she'd been preparing to navigate all of this alone. Now she was sitting next to a man who had learned to change diapers at 3 a.m. without complaint, who sang off-key lullabies that somehow always put Lily to sleep, who had moved to a smaller apartment in Queens so he could be 10 minutes away instead of 30. "Ask me," she said quietly. "What? Ask me. The question you've been wanting to ask for 6 months. Matthias's face transformed, hope and terror mixing in equal measure. "Charlie Montgomery, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve the family you've given me?" Charlie looked down at Lily, who had abandoned her banana in favor of trying to grab the bracelet box, her little face scrunched up in concentration. "What do you think, baby girl?" Charlie asked seriously. "Or should we keep him?" Lily looked up at Matthias and broke into the kind of smile that could power small cities, reaching her sticky hands toward his face with absolute trust and joy. "I think that's a yes," Charlie said, laughing through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "From both of us." Matthias kissed her then, right there on the park bench with Lily clapping her hands between them, and Charlie tasted salt from both their tears and the kind of happiness she'd never thought she deserved. "I love you," Matthias whispered against her lips. "Both of you. More than I ever knew it was possible to love anything." "I love you too," Charlie whispered back, and meant it completely. "But if you ever run away again, Oakley has threatened to hunt you down and make you very sorry. Oakley's actually been giving me parenting tips," Matthias admitted with a grin. "Did you know she has a 37-point plan for Lily's first birthday party?" "Of course she does. And I'm sure you've organized it into a color-coded spreadsheet." "Obviously. We make a good team." As they packed up their picnic and prepared to head home, Charlie thought with wonder, the apartment that now held Matthias's coffee maker next to her tea collection, his medical journals mixed with her romance novels, their daughter's toys scattered across every available surface. Charlie found herself thinking about the difference between the ending she'd planned for and the one she'd been brave enough to accept. 6 months ago, she'd thought strength meant doing everything alone. Now she knew it meant choosing to build something beautiful with someone who had proven himself worthy of the choice. Later that evening, as they gave Lily her bath, a process that somehow resulted in more water on the bathroom floor than in the tub, Charlie caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who'd sat in that hospital bed 9 months ago, terrified and alone. This woman looked confident, loved, and surrounded by the kind of chaos that only came from a life full of people worth fighting for. "Penny for your thoughts," Matthias said, wrapping Lily in a towel that made her look like a tiny, adorable burrito. "I was just thinking," Charlie said, helping him wrestle Lily into pajamas covered in tiny elephants, "about how sometimes the best love stories aren't about finding the perfect person. They're about 2 imperfect people choosing to become better versions of themselves together." Matthias paused in the middle of snapping Lily's pajamas, looking at Charlie with an expression so full of love and gratitude that she felt her breath catch. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that choice," he said seriously. "Good," Charlie said, kissing Lily's forehead and then his, "because we're planning to hold you to that promise." As they settled Lily into her crib for the night, the same crib Matthias had built in Charlie's living room all those months ago, Charlie thought about second chances and the courage it took to believe in them. Some people didn't deserve forgiveness, but some people were brave enough to become the kind of person who did. Outside Lily's window, the lights of Queens twinkled in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance, Oakley was probably planning their wedding with the same military precision she'd applied to everything else in their lives. Charlie fell asleep that night next to the man who had learned to choose love over fear, listening to their daughter's peaceful breathing through the baby monitor, wearing a bracelet that symbolized the past they'd overcome and the future they were building together. Sometimes the best stories weren't about finding happily ever after. Sometimes they were about two people who were brave enough to create it. I Kotir, what would you do if you had the chance to rewrite your own love story? Would you be brave enough to forgive someone who truly changed? Or would you choose the safety of going it alone? Your participation in this channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.